The Crimson Forest of Zitherus was a place of legends, a forbidden zone where the air shimmered with an eerie glow, and the trees whispered secrets of the past. It was here that Kale, a human space explorer, found himself after his ship malfunctioned and crash-landed on the alien planet. The impact had left him bruised and disoriented, but his survival instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed his gear and ventured into the forest, unaware that his life was about to change forever. As he navigated through the dense foliage, Kale couldn't help but marvel at the alien beauty surrounding him. The trees were unlike anything he had ever seen, their bark glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. The air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers, and the ground beneath his feet felt warm, as if the planet itself was alive. But Kale knew better than to let his guard down. He had heard stories of Zitherus, a planet ruled by a strict council that despised outsiders. Deep in the forest, Zanara, the princess of Zitherus, was on a secret mission of her own. She had always been curious about the Forbidden Forest, a place her people feared and avoided. Her long, silvery hair flowed like liquid moonlight, and her skin, a deep shade of violet, shimmered under the forest's glow. She moved with grace, her slender figure blending seamlessly with the environment. But her violet eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the area for any signs of danger. It was by chance that their paths crossed. Kale, hearing a rustle in the bushes, instinctively raised his weapon, only to lower it when he saw Zanara emerge from the shadows. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, two beings from different worlds, united by fate. Kale was struck by her beauty, while Zanara was fascinated by the human's rugged appearance and the intensity in his eyes. "Who are you?" Zanara asked, her voice melodic yet commanding. She spoke in her native tongue, but Kale's universal translator quickly decoded her words. "I'm Kale," he replied, keeping his tone calm. "I mean no harm. My ship crashed, and I'm just trying to survive." Zanara studied him carefully, her instincts telling her that he was different from the other humans she had heard about. There was a raw strength in him, but also a vulnerability that intrigued her. "This forest is dangerous," she said finally. "You shouldn't be here." "I don't have much of a choice," Kale admitted. "Can you help me?" Zanara hesitated. Helping an outsider was forbidden, and if the council found out, the consequences would be severe. But something about Kale drew her in, a connection she couldn't explain. "Follow me," she said after a moment. "But stay close, and do exactly as I say." As they made their way through the forest, Kale couldn't help but notice how Zanara moved with effortless grace, her every step calculated and precise. He also noticed the way her skin seemed to react to the environment, glowing brighter in certain areas and dimming in others. It was as if she was in sync with the planet itself. "Your skin," Kale said, unable to contain his curiosity. "It's incredible." Zanara glanced at him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "It's a trait of my kind. Our skin reacts to emotions and the environment. It's how we communicate without words." "Fascinating," Kale murmured. "Humans don't have anything like that." "No," Zanara agreed. "But you have other qualities. Your strength, for one. I can sense it in you." Kale smiled faintly. "I guess we're not so different after all." As they continued their journey, the tension between them grew. It was subtle at first, a lingering glance here, a brush of hands there. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. The forest seemed to amplify their emotions, the air around them crackling with an unspoken energy. Finally, they reached a small clearing where Zanara decided they could rest. The twin suns of Zitherus were setting, casting a golden hue over the landscape. Kale sat down on a moss-covered rock, his body aching from the day's events. Zanara joined him, her presence both comforting and electrifying. "Why did you help me?" Kale asked, breaking the silence. "You didn't have to." Zanara looked at him, her violet eyes soft yet intense. "I don't know," she admitted. "There's something about you, Kale. Something I can't explain. Kale reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers. Maybe it's because we're not so different after all. Zanara's skin glowed brighter at his touch, a sign of her growing emotions. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin. Maybe, she whispered. In that moment, the forbidden bond between them was sealed. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a fusion of two worlds colliding. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the air around them shimmering with an otherworldly light. It was a moment of pure connection, a defiance of the laws that sought to keep them apart. But their moment of bliss was short-lived. A distant sound snapped them back to reality, and Zanara's eyes widened in alarm. "We need to go," she said urgently. "They've found us." Kale didn't need to ask who they were. He could feel the danger closing in. Together, they fled deeper into the forest, their bond stronger than ever. But little did they know, their love would soon become the catalyst for a revolution that would change the fate of two worlds. The twin suns of Zithris blazed overhead, casting a relentless heat over the crimson forest. Kale and Zanara moved quickly, their footsteps light but urgent as they navigated the treacherous terrain. The hunters were close, Zanara could feel their presence like a cold shadow creeping up her spine. Her skin, usually a deep violet, now pulsed with streaks of crimson, a sign of her heightened emotions. Kale, though unfamiliar with her kind's physiology, could sense her distress. "How much farther?" Kale asked, his voice low but steady. He was drenched in sweat, his human body struggling to adapt to the planet's extreme climate. "Not far," Zanara replied, her eyes scanning the dense foliage. "There's a hidden cave ahead. We can rest there until nightfall." Kale nodded, trusting her instincts. Despite the danger, he couldn't help but admire her strength and resilience. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, alien in every sense of the word, yet profoundly human in her determination and courage. As they reached the cave, Zanara quickly activated a concealed entrance, revealing a small but secure hideout. The interior was cool and dimly lit, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat outside. Kale collapsed onto the ground, his muscles aching from the relentless pace. Zanara knelt beside him, her glowing hands hovering over his body as she assessed his condition. "You're overheating," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Your body isn't built for this environment." "I'll be fine," Kale assured her, though his breathing was labored. "I've been through worse." Zanara's eyes softened, and she reached into a hidden compartment, retrieving a small vial of liquid. "Drink this," she instructed. "It will help regulate your body temperature." Kale hesitated for a moment before taking the vial and downing its contents. The liquid was cool and refreshing, instantly easing the burning sensation in his chest. "What is this?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "A remedy made from the sap of the crimson trees," Zanara explained. "It's one of the many secrets of this forest." Kale smiled faintly. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Zanara's lips curved into a small smile, her skin glowing softly. "You have no idea." As the hours passed, the tension between them grew. The cave, though small, felt like a sanctuary, a place where the outside world couldn't reach them. Kale found himself drawn to Zanara in ways he couldn't explain. Her presence was intoxicating, her every movement captivating. For Zanara, Kale represented something she had never known, freedom, passion, and a connection that transcended the boundaries of her world. "Tell me about your people," Kale said, breaking the silence. "Why do they fear outsiders so much?" Zanara sighed, her expression darkening. "The Council believes that contact with other species will corrupt our way of life. They see outsiders as a threat to our purity and traditions." "But you don't believe that," Kale stated, his eyes searching hers. "No," Zanara admitted. "I believe that true strength comes from understanding and embracing differences. But the Council, they are powerful, and their influence is far-reaching." Kale reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers. Then we'll find a way to change that. Together. Zanara's skin shimmered at his touch, a sign of her growing emotions. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin. You make it sound so simple, she whispered. It's not, Kale admitted. But nothing worth fighting for ever is. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a fusion of two worlds colliding. The cave seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a moment of pure connection. Zanara's skin glowed brighter, her emotions manifesting in a beautiful display of light and color. Kale, though unfamiliar with such displays, found it mesmerizing. You're beautiful, he murmured, his voice filled with awe. Zanara's eyes sparkled with a mixture of joy and vulnerability. And you are unlike anyone I've ever known. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted by a distant sound, a low hum that seemed to reverberate through the cave. Zanara's expression turned serious as she quickly moved to the entrance, her senses on high alert. They're here, she said, her voice tense. We need to move. Kale stood, his body rejuvenated by the remedy and their shared moment. Lead the way. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the hunters closed in. The air was thick with tension, the twin suns casting long shadows that seemed to dance with menace. Kale and Zanara moved with precision, their bond growing stronger with each step. There's a river ahead, Zanara said, her voice barely above a whisper. If we can cross it, we might lose them. Kale nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. Let's do it. The river was wide and fast-flowing, its waters a deep shade of crimson. Zanara hesitated for a moment before stepping into the water, her skin glowing faintly as she adjusted to the temperature. Kale followed, the cool water providing a brief respite from the heat. As they reached the other side, the hunters emerged from the trees, their weapons drawn. Zanara's eyes narrowed as she prepared to defend herself, but Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding. Stay behind me, he said, his voice firm. You don't have to do this alone, Zanara protested, her skin pulsing with determination. I know, Kale replied, his eyes meeting hers. But this is my fight too. The hunters attacked with precision, their movements swift and calculated. Kale, though outnumbered, used his superior strength and combat skills to hold them off. Zanara, meanwhile, unleashed her hidden powers, her skin glowing brightly as she created barriers of light to protect them. Together, they fought with a synergy that defied logic, their bond giving them strength. The hunters, unprepared for such resistance, began to falter. With a final burst of energy, Kale and Zanara managed to drive them back, forcing them to retreat into the forest. As the dust settled, Kale turned to Zanara, his breathing heavy but his spirit unbroken. We make a good team, he said, a hint of a smile on his lips. Zanara's skin glowed softly, a sign of her relief and admiration. We do, she agreed. But this is only the beginning. The council won't stop until we're captured, or worse. Then we'll keep fighting, Kale said, his voice filled with determination. For our freedom, and for the future of both our worlds. Zanara reached out, her hand gently touching his. Together, she said, her voice steady. Together, Kale echoed, their bond stronger than ever. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the forest in a golden glow, Kale and Zanara continued their journey. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but they were ready to face it, together. The crimson forest grew darker as night fell, the twin suns replaced by the soft glow of Zithar's 3 moons. Kale and Zanara moved silently through the shadows, their senses heightened by the constant threat of pursuit. The hunters had retreated for now, but both knew it was only a matter of time before the council sent more. We need to find allies, Zanara said, her voice barely above a whisper. There are others who oppose the council, rebels who have been fighting in secret. Rebels? Kale asked, his interest piqued. Where can we find them? Deep in the heart of the forest, Zanara replied. There's a hidden settlement, but it's heavily guarded. We'll need to be careful. Kale nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. If they're fighting the council, they might be willing to help us. Or they might see you as a threat, Zenara cautioned. Humans are rare on Zithris, and not everyone trusts outsiders. Then we'll have to earn their trust, Kale said, his determination unwavering. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew cooler, and the trees seemed to close in around them. The bioluminescent patterns on the bark pulsed faintly, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. Zenara led the way, her movements graceful and precise, while Kale followed closely, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. After hours of travel, they finally reached the edge of the rebel settlement. It was a sprawling network of treehouses and underground tunnels, hidden from the prying eyes of the council. The rebels, a diverse group of Zytherians, moved about with purpose, their faces etched with determination. Zenara stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "I am Zenara, daughter of the High Counselor," she announced, her voice steady. "I seek refuge and alliance with those who oppose the council's tyranny." The rebels turned to her, their expressions a mix of surprise and suspicion. A tall Zytherian with deep blue skin and piercing silver eyes stepped forward, his gaze narrowing as he studied her. "And why should we trust you?" he asked, his voice cold. "Because I have defied the council," Zenara replied, her skin glowing with defiance. "And because I bring with me a human who has proven his strength and loyalty." The rebel leader's eyes shifted to Kale, his expression unreadable. "A human," he said slowly. "Interesting. And what can he offer us?" "My skills," Kale said, stepping forward. "I'm a trained explorer and fighter. I can help you in your fight against the council." The rebel leader studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well. But know this, if you betray us, there will be no mercy." "Understood," Kale said, his tone firm. As they were led into the settlement, Kale and Zenara were introduced to the rebels' way of life. The settlement was a hive of activity, with rebels training, strategizing, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the council. Despite the tension, there was a sense of camaraderie and purpose that Kale found inspiring. "This is incredible," Kale said as they were shown to their quarters. "These people are risking everything for their freedom." "Yes," Zenara agreed, her skin glowing softly. "But they need hope, something to unite them and give them strength." "Like us," Kale said, his eyes meeting hers. Zenara nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Like us." That night, as the moons cast their silvery light over the settlement, Kale and Zenara found themselves drawn to each other once again. The danger and uncertainty of their situation only heightened their connection, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. "Do you ever wonder what the future holds?" Zenara asked, her voice soft. "All the time," Kale admitted. "But right now, I'm just focused on the present, on us." Zenara's skin shimmered with emotion as she leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," she whispered. "Neither did I," Kale replied, his voice filled with sincerity. Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a fusion of two worlds colliding. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a moment of pure connection. But their moment of intimacy was interrupted by the sound of alarms blaring throughout the settlement. Kale and Zenara quickly sprang into action, their bond giving them strength as they prepared to face whatever danger awaited them. "The council has found us," a rebel shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "We need to defend the settlement." Kale and Zenara exchanged a determined glance before joining the rebels in their fight. The battle was fierce, with the council's forces launching a relentless assault on the settlement. Kale fought with everything he had, his human strength and ingenuity proving invaluable. Zenara, meanwhile, unleashed her hidden powers, her skin glowing brightly as she created barriers of light to protect her allies. Together, they fought with a synergy that defied logic, their bond giving them strength. The rebels, inspired by their courage, fought with renewed determination, driving the council's forces back. As the dust settled, Kale turned to Zanara, his breathing heavy but his spirit unbroken. "We did it," he said, a hint of a smile on his lips. "We did," Zanara agreed, her skin glowing softly. "But this is only the beginning. The council won't stop until we're captured, or worse. Then we'll keep fighting," Kale said, his voice filled with determination. "For our freedom, and for the future of both our worlds." Zanara reached out, her hand gently touching his. "Together," she said, her voice steady. "Together," Kale echoed, their bond stronger than ever. As the moons cast their silvery light over the settlement, Kale and Zanara stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their love had become a symbol of hope for the rebels, inspiring them to unite against the council's tyranny. And as they prepared for the battles to come, they knew that their bond would be their greatest strength. The rebel settlement buzzed with activity as preparations for the final assault on the council's stronghold began. Kale and Zanara stood at the center of it all, their presence a source of inspiration for the rebels. The battle against the council's forces had united them, but everyone knew the real fight was yet to come. "We need a plan," Kale said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We can't just charge in blindly." "Agreed," Zanara replied, her violet eyes scanning the map spread out before them. "The council's stronghold is heavily fortified, but there's a weakness." Here she pointed to a section of the map where the defenses seemed thinner. "The underground tunnels," Kale said, his eyes lighting up with understanding. "If we can infiltrate from below, we might be able to catch them off guard." "Exactly," Zanara said, her skin glowing with determination. "But it won't be easy. The tunnels are guarded, and the council will be expecting an attack." "Then we'll have to be smarter," Kale said, his mind racing with possibilities. "We'll create a diversion, draw their forces away from the tunnels while a small team infiltrates from below." The rebels nodded in agreement, their confidence bolstered by Kale's strategic thinking. Zanara couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as she watched him take charge, his human ingenuity proving invaluable. "Let's move," Kale said, his voice filled with determination. "We strike at dawn." As the rebels prepared for the battle, Kale and Zanara found a moment alone. The tension between them was palpable, their bond stronger than ever. "Are you ready for this?" Zanara asked, her voice soft but steady. "As ready as I'll ever be," Kale replied, his eyes meeting hers. "But I need to know, are you sure about this? Once we start this fight, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure of anything," Zanara said, her skin glowing with conviction. "This is our chance to change everything, for both our worlds." Kale reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers. "Then let's do this, together." Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a fusion of two worlds colliding. The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a moment of pure connection. But their moment of intimacy was interrupted by the sound of alarms blaring throughout the settlement. The council's forces had launched a preemptive strike, catching the rebels off guard. "We need to move," Kale shouted, his voice filled with urgency. Zanara nodded, her skin glowing brightly as she prepared to unleash her powers. "Let's show them what we're made of." The battle was fierce, with the council's forces launching a relentless assault on the settlement. Kale fought with everything he had, his human strength and ingenuity proving invaluable. Zanara, meanwhile, unleashed her hidden powers, her skin glowing brightly as she created barriers of light to protect her allies. Together, they fought with a synergy that defied logic, their bond giving them strength. The rebels, inspired by their courage, fought with renewed determination, driving the council's forces back. As the dust settled, Kale turned to Zanara, his breathing heavy but his spirit unbroken. "We did it," he said, a hint of a smile on his lips. "We did," Zanara agreed, her skin glowing softly. "But this is only the beginning. The council won't stop until we're captured, or worse. Then we'll keep fighting," Kale said, his voice filled with determination. For our freedom, and for the future of both our worlds. Zenara reached out, her hand gently touching his. Together, she said, her voice steady. Together, Kale echoed, their bond stronger than ever. As the moons cast their silvery light over the settlement, Kale and Zenara stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their love had become a symbol of hope for the rebels, inspiring them to unite against the Council's tyranny. And as they prepared for the battles to come, they knew that their bond would be their greatest strength. The final assault on the Council's stronghold began at dawn, the twin sons of Zithris casting a golden glow over the battlefield. Kale and Zenara led the charge, their bond giving them strength as they fought side by side. The rebels, inspired by their courage, fought with renewed determination, their voices rising in a unified cry for freedom. The battle was fierce, with the Council's forces launching a relentless assault on the rebels. Kale fought with everything he had, his human strength and ingenuity proving invaluable. Zenara, meanwhile, unleashed her hidden powers, her skin glowing brightly as she created barriers of light to protect her allies. Together, they fought with a synergy that defied logic, their bond giving them strength. The rebels, inspired by their courage, fought with renewed determination, driving the Council's forces back. As the dust settled, Kale turned to Zenara, his breathing heavy but his spirit unbroken. "We did it," he said, a hint of a smile on his lips. "We did," Zenara agreed, her skin glowing softly. "But this is only the beginning. The Council won't stop until we're captured, or worse. Then we'll keep fighting," Kale said, his voice filled with determination. "For our freedom, and for the future of both our worlds." Zenara reached out, her hand gently touching his. Together, she said, her voice steady. Together, Kale echoed, their bond stronger than ever. As the moons cast their silvery light over the settlement, Kale and Zenara stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their love had become a symbol of hope for the rebels, inspiring them to unite against the Council's tyranny. And as they prepared for the battles to come, they knew that their bond would be their greatest strength.